When you're driven, the need to accomplish a goal is relentless. Hard work and ambition compel you to do whatever's necessary. In my work as a personal injury trial lawyer for 18 years, it's common to meet driven people. Those with drive can have different personalities, careers, or backgrounds, but they possess one common factor. Despite their passions, driven people want to surround and motivate themselves with other driven people. If you want to learn how to overcome obstacles by learning from others, then tune in here. This is the Driven Crowd Podcast. Thank you for tuning into episode 19 of the Driven Crowd Podcast, fueled by Snellings Law. I'm your host, Scott Snellings. Our guest today is someone who has truly climbed a non-traditional ladder in the medical industry. She started her career in Michigan as a respiratory tech in high school, and over the years, she's held senior executive positions at healthcare facilities across the United States. Now, she's doing great things for the Grayson County community as the CEO of Wilson N. Jones Regional Medical Center in Sherman, Texas. Julie, welcome to the Driven Crowd Podcast.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
Good morning. So we just had a discussion on the fact that it is not Wilson and Jones Regional Medical Center. It is Wilson N, as in an initial, Jones. I've been in this area my entire life and I had no idea. I always called it Wilson and Jones.
Yep, many people do. Wilson and Jones has been around for over 100 years and was founded by Wilson and Jones. He was actually a Choctaw chief.
Oh, interesting. All right. So the reverse of Holland Oates, right? Exactly. Not Holland Oates, as I always thought. And then I saw an album cover and I was like, wait, that's two guys.
Yep. Yep.
All right, Julie, let's start off. Where and how did you grow up?
I grew up a Michigan native and
a Michigander.
Michigander, very good. I went to the University of Michigan, did my undergraduate in nursing. Moved to Chicagoland, was out there for about 10 years, and then moved to the Dallas area in 98.
All right, so you got away from that cold weather.
Yes, I did, and I'm not going back.
It's funny, we've had several people who were from the north, and they got down here and they said the exact same thing. I got away from the cold, and I'm not going back.
I see the sun almost every day. It's wonderful. I go visit, but I'm coming back to the warmth.
And you can also actually take left-hand turns in Texas.
Yes, you can. You don't have to do a Michigan turn, which is get in the left and then do a U-turn, sort of, in the middle of the road. Yeah.
I've never seen anything like it. When I used to do work in Detroit, after graduating from law school and in my first law school job, I was sent up to Detroit several times. And the very first thing they told me was, hey, when you get up there, because I had a rental car, they're like, you can't make left-hand turns. You got to do a Michigan left.
That's right.
I said, a Michigan? Well, what is that? They're like, it's a U-turn. Because you can't turn left at lights. It's the craziest thing I've ever seen. But I guess you avoid a lot of crashes that way. I don't know.
I don't know either, but I do Michigan left-hand turns still here. It works.
Now you just have to do it in big old pickup trucks and things like that everyone drives around here,
That's right.
So growing up in Michigan, did you always want to be in the medical industry? I mean, it looks like you got started early, your senior year in high school.
I started out working for farmers, believe it or not. I grew up in the country, and so I detasseled corn, hoed beets and beans, worked livestock, milked cows, shoveled a lot of organic material. And when I was going through high school, a good friend of the family was a nurse at one of the local hospitals. And she said, there's an opening, you'd be great. I had no idea what I was doing. I'd gotten scholarships to go to college, but I was just kind of like, cool. Had no idea. Started there when I was 17, and the respiratory therapy department was in the basement next to the morgue.
Oh.
And I learned a lot. 90% of the staff were in their 20s, and so they kind of took me under their wing, and I was very well prepared. Eye-opening experience for me.
I bet. So growing up, farming and ranching duties, that's hard work. What kind of day, or what was your typical day like? What time did you have to get up? What time did you go to bed at night?
When I worked for the farmers, for example, in the summertime, when you detasseled corn and things of that nature, I would get up at 5. You'd get there by 6 because the sun was coming up and you wanted to do as much work as you could. You'd take about 4 hours of work, take 30 minutes off, grab something to eat, drink some water, and get back to work. So I really learned work ethic. I learned to do it right the first time. So, for example, if I'm detasseling corn and I missed a row, I'd have to go back and get it right.
Wow, detasseling corn. That's not shucking corn. What does detasseling corn mean?
So there are male and female corn. Did you know that?
I had
the
no idea.
Plants, yes.
I'm learning all kinds of stuff today.
Yes, we are. So the males, for the females, what do they pollinate, right?
Right.
And so that's when the corn starts to grow. So what the chemical industries did is that they isolated the male fermenting process, and they would grow one row of male and then 5 female. So you would detassel what you didn't want, like one row of male, so that it would get a bigger area of pollination.
Wow. So not too many kids would want that kind of a schedule. How did you end up working for farmers?
I grew up in the country. I worked for dairy farmers, all sorts of farms. My friend, her dad had a farm, and so we would hoe beans and beets, and then another one had a dairy farm. It was just extra money. So I was babysitting, working for the farmers, and saving money so I could buy a Vega when I turned 16 years old.
It's so funny how the work ethic is amazing when you're trying to buy your first vehicle.
Yeah, it was like, earn the money, kid. And so I did, and it was awesome. It was brown, and 1974, baby.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic. So when you go and you go into the respiratory tech program, that had to seem like the easiest cakewalk ever for you, having to not get up at 5 a.m. and then go be out in the sun all day or the cold, depending on the season, I guess.
Yes and no. So the hours were better. There was air conditioning, and it was a completely different world. And so all of a sudden, you have responsibility. You're taking care of patients. You have to learn how an order is read. You have to learn medications. You have to learn what to do and what not to do. And I'm looking around, I'm 17 years old, and, I just stuck to the rules. I learned that a long time ago. If the farmers laid down a rule, follow it, and you pretty much can't go wrong. And so that's what I did. I learned so much, but, I saw my first dead person, and I was just devastated. I'd never seen anything like that before. I would see patients get better, which was really nice. I was able to see the flow of the hospital, how the nurses were, how the physicians were, communication. When a patient got into trouble, what was my job? How do I do CPR? I had to learn all of that. And so I learned that by the time I was 18 years old, and I was done with nursing school by the time I was 20.
Oh, wow. So you had a nursing school degree at 20 years old. That's pretty young to have the ability to have those kinds of responsibilities. Interesting. So what do you think about your farming background and your ranching background transferred over to your respiratory tech and then on to nursing?
That's a great question. I think about it all the time. It was really hard when you're a kid. It's like you're getting up, you're sludging through these fields, you're picking corn, you're working, you're shoveling organic material. But I learned that if I had a goal, and what was my goal? I needed money to buy a car. And then I learned the other thing was family from these farmers. That was their livelihood. They depended on me. They depended on my work. And they rewarded and recognized good behavior, which was really nice. I learned that too. Good job, kid. You did what I said to do. Come back tomorrow.
So you basically had to earn your place on the line, if you will, each and every day.
Yes, I did. And I had to earn my place at the hospital too. I mean, you're 17 years old. Everybody else is in their 20s and 30s, and so I had to earn my place there.
And so you mentioned kind of early on learning the goal setting, right? You wanted the car. That's what got you up at 5 a.m. Mm-hmm. That's a pretty far away goal, right? Whether you started at 14 or 15.
12.
12. Okay, so 12. That's 4 years before you're even allowed to drive the car, and I don't even know how old you were when you were able to purchase it, but. on the days when it's just, oh, I don't really care about the car. I just want an extra hour of sleep. I don't want to go out there. How did you make yourself get up? What drove you? Were you able to just focus on that car on down the road, or did you focus on just that day and earning $20 or whatever it was that you were earning, or how did you go about it?
So, great story. I was 12 years old, working for farmers, babysitting, and working hard keeps you out of trouble.
That's what my parents always said.
Exactly. So my parents never had to work. They always knew where I was. And when I was 12, what year in junior high, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was bored out of my mind in school. And one of the teachers, Carol McManus, I'll never forget it, she took an interest in me, and why, I don't know. I mean, I was tall, so I was always in sports. I played sports. I was in band. And so she came up to me one day in the hallway, and she's like, you know, your grades aren't what they need to be. And I'm just kind of looking at her. Okay. And she said, tell you what, you get all A's, and I'll take you to a Michigan football game.
Wow.
Can you do that? And so I love a good challenge. And I was like, sure. I didn't have any idea where Ann Arbor, Michigan was. I knew the Wolverines on football. So I got all A's. So she calls my parents and she said, I didn't think this kid was going to do this. Did she tell you? And they're like, no. Well, she got all A's. So is it okay if I take her to a Michigan football game? And my mom was like, Carol, did you go to Central Michigan? She said, yeah. And she said, I think you went to school with my sister, Kathy. And they did. I didn't even know they were classmates. So down to Ann Arbor we go. Ann Arbor in a University of Michigan football game in the big house, and I'm 12 years old. And I was like, holy crap.
There's more people I've ever seen in my life.
106,000
Yeah, it's a huge stadium.
And we sat by the student section. And I was like, oh, I want to go here. And she's like, well, then work. Stop messing around. I know you're bored, but find something that interests you. It's that simple. Keep your body busy, keep your mind busy, and focus on your goal. And I was like, I'm going to University of Michigan. I'm in. And it was in my blood. I'm telling you, I was so excited. And I would tell the kids at school, and they're like, where? I'm like, it's University of Michigan. Come on, man. So,
It's like a kid around here not knowing where the University of Texas was.
Exactly. Yeah. So that really, it wasn't just a car anymore. It was like, I really want to go here. This was amazing. This was like all these students and the campus and just the city itself. And it was 90 miles from home, which to me was like on the other side of the world because I'd never been anywhere else.
Wow. So your teacher, what an amazing challenge too, because she knew exactly what she was doing. If you were to make those straight A's, clearly you had the ability. Mm-hmm. And then the reward was she's going to put you in an atmosphere to further spur you on mm-hmm. in your educational area. That's amazing. So the challenge is issued. You decide you want to go to the University of Michigan. Mm-hmm. You had been bored in school. Did you remain bored, or how did you find your focus to start making straight A's and build up to the point where you could go to the University of Michigan?
I was bored because I wasn't interested. And then I started to really focus on what the message the teachers were trying to teach and stop listening to the noise of everybody else in class. And then, I took a biology class, which was like, oh, I like this. Chemistry, I loved it. So I started to figure out what I really liked. Mm. It wasn't just the English class, the math class, because you're kind of like herded, right? Okay,
totally, yeah.
7th grade, you're all going to take pre-algebra,
Right.
That's the kind of thing. So I started to be really interested in those types of classes. And then I started to excel. So then it was like, okay, you're in National Honor Society. What does that mean? And then counselors would come and start talking. Okay, now what do you want to do? So here's where you're at. Where are your interests? And it took off from there.
And so it kind of sounds like success begets more success and mm-hmm. kind of keeps you interested in moving forward of not just this goal of going to going to football games at the big house on Saturdays and going to the University of Michigan, but getting into classes that interest you and making better grades and learning more and of the things that you're interested in as opposed to just the normal classes that we all had to take growing up.
Yeah, and the other thing was once I saw Ann Arbor and the town and the community and the stadium, I was like, yeah, I don't want to live in Saginaw anymore. And I don't want to work for the farmers anymore. So it was really a decisive moment, like, yeah, I want something else. Now, mind you, none of my family had ever moved anywhere else. Everybody was in the area and, very happy and very family oriented. And I started to become the rebel.
The rebel. And did you embrace that, or did you feel guilt for wanting to
No.
get away?
Never, ever. At first, a little bit, but none of my other family members had gone to the University of Michigan. I was also accepted at Notre Dame, big Irish Catholic family. They're like, yes. I'm like, no.
Right.
So, and most of them were school teachers. My dad worked for General Motors. So he worked on the line for 45 years. I'm like,
Wow.
I don't want to do that.
Wow. And so you said you liked biology and chemistry. Did that immediately signal to you, hey, maybe the medical field is for me? Or how did you end up headed towards that direction?
If it wouldn't have been for our family friend saying, hey, there's a job opening, and then I could listen to other nurses, I could watch what they did, how they did it, I could listen to the physicians, work with the physicians. That's when I really decided what I wanted to do.
Okay, and this was at 17 or 17, 18. Okay. Mm-hmm. And so you never had any kind of a dream as a little girl of being a nurse or a doctor or anything like that? You weren't influenced by TV shows or anything like that? You just kind of happened upon it and found your calling?
Exactly. I mean, we watched we had 3 channels. NBC, CBS, right?
All staticky.
Oh, yeah. And then you had to use the rabbit ears with a tin foil. So
nobody move. We have a signal.
Yeah, back in the day, it was like Gunsmoke,
Right.
So.
Okay. All right. So you become a respiratory tech. You graduate from high school, and did you end up going to the University of Michigan?
I went to Delta College first.
Okay.
I had a full scholarship at Delta. And then when I graduated magna cum laude from Delta, I got a full ride to Michigan.
And so was Delta like a community college?
Community college. Mm-hmm.
And what was your degree from in community college?
Nursing.
Nursing. Mm-hmm. All right. And so you go on to University of Michigan. Is that for a master's program, or is that to get your undergrad degree in nursing?
I had a full ride to get my PhD.
Whoa. Mm-hmm. So all the way. Mm-hmm. All right. What happened there?
I met the man of my dreams.
He foiled your plans.
It did not work out as planned.
Right.
Yep. Yeah. That was exciting. So I was working at the University of Michigan Hospital, and it was a brand new hospital. And so they had towers of surgical ICU, burn ICU. So it was like SICU, TICU, which was thoracic ICU, BICU, burn ICU, PICU, pediatric ICU. So when I was in Saginaw going to nursing school, I became a registered nurse, a graduate nurse, and I was working in the intensive care unit. So from there, I transferred to University of Michigan, and I was working in the ICUs. And I started to excel and get certified, like I was a certified nurse trauma specialist. So I trained at Cook County and Detroit Receiving. Then I started flying on helicopters and fixed wings, and they would take you out to an accident, and then you'd get back on the helicopter and then transport. So that was pretty cool.
And I have heard quite dangerous. Is that accurate?
Yes, it is. And one of my friends actually perished.
Ugh.
She was doing a trip from Ann Arbor to Colorado to pick up a patient, and it was fixed wing, which is an airplane, and they crashed into the side of a mountain.
Mm.
Yeah.
And how long did you do the air transport or air nursing?
I was at University of Michigan for 4 or 5 years, so probably 3 of those 5 years.
And so, ordinarily as a trauma nurse, you are not high man on the totem pole, right? You have an attending physician who, obviously has more training and can do more things. But in that situation, it's you and a pilot. Am I right?
That is correct.
And the pilot's not an MD.
That is correct.
And so how did that change the dynamics, and how did that put more pressure on you in those situations where you were the one who had to save the life or not?
Well, you have your protocols. So you always go back to your training. Airway, breathing, circulation. Always go back to your training. My job was to stabilize the patient.
Okay.
So I could do whatever needed to be stabilizing the patient. You get orders, so I could call into the emergency room. I worked in the emergency room as well. So if I needed orders, I could get those. We could radio in and say, hey, this is what I'm doing, blah, blah, blah. So you had a lot of protocols to follow, which was nice.
Yes, but they're relying completely on your observations.
Correct.
You have to know what you're looking at, what to report back, and giving them the information because they can't see it or touch it or hear 100%. It with their own eyes, ears, hands.
Yes, sir.
And so was that, for you, more stressful than being in your ordinary ICU or emergency room?
No, you go back to your training. In the helicopter, it's very small. And so we would have 2 trauma nurses go. And so there would be times when the patient was too big. And so one of us nurses had to flip a coin to see who was going to go on the transport. So there were a lot of variables. One time I was flying, it was me. I was in a helicopter with the patient. It was a MVA, motor vehicle accident. And we were heading back to Ann Arbor, and it was the 4th of July. And so fireworks was going off, and I can't really see much because I'm in the back and you're in a corner and the patient's in front of me. And all of a sudden we started to go down and up and sideways and around. And the pilot's name was John, and you're radioing, you have a helmet on. I'm like, John, what's going on? Because I'm flying all over.
Right.
And he had happened to have been a Vietnam vet. Ooh. And the fireworks, he had post-traumatic stress syndrome. And so the fireworks put him back into some sort of Vietnam thing. And we were like, it was horrible. And so I remember going, okay. And I took an IV bag and I threw it at the back of his head, and it bounced him, and he was like, he just kind of came out of it. And he's like, I'm so sorry, Jules. I'm like, let's just get back. That's scary.
Oh my gosh.
So there's all sorts of things. You never know. Weather was always an issue. Sometimes you couldn't go,
And as I say with helicopters, if it's not leaking something, then that's a bad sign because that means it's out of fluid.
Exactly. I didn't want to know.
Exactly. Wow. Okay. So you do that for a while. At what point do you start thinking maybe moving out of the trenches, so to speak, and into more of an administrative role is where you want to take your career? So
you remember I met the man of my dreams.
Yes.
And we got married and moved to Chicago. And we had our first daughter. And so then I was like, I can't do 16-hour days anymore. I can't continue to work in the emergency room. It's dangerous. You're exposed to everything. And so I took a job as a practice manager in Park Ridge. And I was managing a physician's office. And so there were multiple physicians. And then a friend of mine called me and said, hey, come to work with me. I'd gone to school with her. And so I got into being a director of quality management. So in quality management, you have to do all the regulatory stuff. We're very highly regulated with the CMS, Centers for Medicaid and Medicare and such. But moreover, it's a job that you help people with processes and function. And I love processes. I love doing things that are right down my alley. And so I did that for about 10 years. We moved to Dallas, as I said, in 98. So I had lots of experience in Chicago, and then I started working for the Baylor healthcare system. and quickly was the corporate director of quality improvement. Got my certification and everything.
And so how was that transition for you going from treating patients, emergency room, crazy shifts, all kinds of adrenaline all the time, to going into a completely different role, practice management, which doesn't sound, at least that we've talked about, that you have any experience whatsoever in. How did you handle that transition? And how did you learn the new job and start to thrive there?
So the practice manager was interesting, and I stepped out of my comfort zone. And the other thing I had done, I didn't mention, I also worked as a home health care nurse on the side because I wanted to buy a new Camaro. It goes back to the car. And so I got a lot of experience working on the inpatient side, and then I would go and take care of patients in their homes. It was a fabulous experience. And so I knew everything about inpatient, when they go home, when they see their primary care physician. I knew about diseases, congestive heart failure, kidney failure. So I knew all of that as well. So the practice manager was not difficult. Always the most difficult piece is managing people.
Amen.
And, you have physicians, and so normally you have some egos to go along with that. All they wanted was their practice to be managed. They just wanted to be profitable and take care of their patients. That's easy to do.
And so did you, as you were learning that position, how did you approach it? Did you walk in and just kind of watch what was going on and you start to see some things that maybe could be improved? Or did you kind of go in with a mindset of, okay, I'm going to kind of recreate the wheel here and start from, we're going to be completely process driven or systems driven practice and go from there?
I never, ever going like, I know everything. This is the way it's going to be. I walked in very humble and said, you guys have been here for a while. I have a lot to learn, so I'm going to learn from you. And by that, I mean, I'm going to sit at the front desk and I'm going to answer phones. I'm going to work with the billers in the back to figure out, what that looks like. I'm going to round with the physicians to make sure that they have what they need. So on my very first day, somebody had stolen money from the safe. That was my first day. I'm like, okay, well,
there's
nice.
an opportunity right there for you.
So there was a big safe, and when you did, patients walked in and they had like a $10 copay or whatever. They would staple the money to the receipt and throw it in the safe. Well, they figured out that you could turn the safe upside down and you could reach your skinny little arm in there or take a coat hanger and you could pull out all the cash. And then they would push the safe back upright. Like nobody's going to catch them the next day, right? Oh, all of these disappeared. And there's supposed to be a log, you're supposed to document it. So it wasn't too hard to figure out who that was. Back in the day, we didn't have cameras everywhere, right? So on my second day, I caught the person and had to fire the person on the second day. So the staff was like, oh, nice. I'm like, oh, not really, but okay. So.
Wow. Okay. So you go in there, and when did you start feeling like, hey, I have a knack for this? We're making some positive changes here. Things are getting better, and I'm really enjoying what I'm doing.
Because I have that work ethic, and I work hard, I'm always looking to improve it. And I'm a servant leader, which means I'm there to serve. I enjoy it when we have a culture of working together and things work smoothly. So that took about 1.5 years. It always takes time. And then I just decided to move on from there because, I had friends and they're like, hey, come work with us. I'm like, okay.
Sure. Yeah. I've been here, done this.
Yeah.
Let's see what the next project is. So you mentioned culture, which is, I think hugely important. You walk in, you have people stealing from the safe, okay? Probably at least some part of a culture problem. You have the wrong people in your business.
Correct.
How did you go about establishing a culture and then making sure that the people who were there fit within that culture, or they were gone and replaced with people who did?
It was a mixed bag. It was when you work in a physician's office, we had 5 different physicians, but they all have their little pods. And by that I mean they had their little kingdom, their little fiefdom. So this is my nurse. This is how we do it. Dr. Smith has his nurse, and that's how they do it. And it was just chaos every day because you had to remember how Dr. Smith wanted it done and Dr. Jones, So I worked with him to say this is going to be a lot easier. I really worked hard to make sure that they were getting paid for what they did. There were a lot of billing errors, things like that. So I worked mostly on that. And then it just kind of, okay, you know what you're doing. This is much better than it was. And then you start working together.
You started getting the doctors paid, and all of a sudden, hey, you know what? Maybe I can do it her way.
Exactly. Yeah, because it's never better when you go in, this is going to be the way that it is, ever, never.
Sure. And so, obviously you had mentioned you work with physicians. You work with physicians today as CEO of Wilson and Jones. How do you go about, obviously you're not going to go tell physicians, hey, here's what we're going to do, but how do you go about getting physicians to work together, putting, the egos aside and really working for the benefit of the team as a whole? Or have you cracked that problem yet?
Boy, that's a great question. So I'm thinking, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
So when I started at Wilson and Jones, best culture I've ever walked into in my life.
Wow.
Bar none. You could feel it when you walked in the door, from the pastoral care, from the volunteers, to the housekeepers, to the dietary, to the nurses. It was fabulous. And I felt right at home. As a servant leader, they were to serve as well. My administrative assistant has been there since 1979. I've got a nurse that's celebrating her 45th year.
Wow.
I've got people that are there because they want to be there. I was in heaven because I don't have to do anything. The culture's here. Yay.
Right.
So physicians can be independent or they can be employed. And so it's up to them. My job is to make sure they have what they need to do their job. Along with that, my job is also to make sure that we're doing the right thing and we're doing the right thing well. And so very quickly you learn what's going well and what's not going well. So we all have rules and regs to follow. I learned that, easy going on. And when you have bylaws, rules, and regulations, you need to follow those because there's a reason. It's the law. And so I had a particular physician who wasn't following the rules, regs, and bylaws, and hadn't been doing it for over 40 years.
Ooh.
And so in I come, and it was just the very worst, wrong way to go about it. It was very difficult. And trust me, I pray about these things every single day. Like, how do I approach this? What do I do? Everybody was afraid. Nobody would tackle the problem. Everybody knew about it. Everybody swept it under the rug. Was it affecting patient care? Absolutely. That's where I draw the line. So this becomes a very black and white issue. And so I was armed with facts. I was armed with rules, regs, and bylaws, and presented it to the medical staff. And the medical staff was, well, that's just the way we've always done it. And I'm like, well, we have to draw the line somewhere. And as the CEO, would you respect me if I swept things under the rug? No. All right, well, I'm going to have to make this very difficult position, but this is what we're going to have to do. And so we did it. And this particular physician was not happy, but he understood. And that was important. And he respected me at the end of the day. Wasn't happy with me, still isn't happy with me. Are we friends? No. Am I going to get invited to his house? Never. But that was the first major hurdle. And then you could see, okay, we have a direction here. We're going to get on the right road. We're going to do the right thing. We're going to do it well. We're going to take care of our patients, and then we're going to move on.
And so you had a phrase in there which makes my skin crawl, which is that's how we've always done it.
Mm-hmm.
How do you, well, and I guess you just gave a perfect example of how you deal with that, but when you hear those words, to me, that's not really an answer, right? And so what's your response to that's the way we've always done it, if you hear that?
I dive in to understand why.
Mm-hmm.
Why has this been left to languish? Why are we doing things this way? So I always dig for the answer. It's like Paul Harvey, what's the other side of the story?
Right.
And what I found out and what I discovered very quickly is that there had not been leaders in positions that were willing to make those types of decisions. And so it all starts with the leadership. So it was not optimal. So that's really what happened. The leaders just kind of swept it under the rug and off we go.
Well, and I think that tends to become more and more common, especially in successful organizations, right? Hey, things are going well. We don't have to address this issue, so we'll just leave it.
Sometimes, but things hadn't been going well for a very long time. So in my opinion, it became, how do I survive? How do I stay in this job? Let's just kind of all float down the water together.
Right.
Nobody's going to say anything.
And so I guess we kind of jumped ahead of ourselves. How did you get from practice manager all the way to CEO of an amazing hospital?
Thank you. A lot of hard work, a lot of education. So I went back to school, got a master's in business, and found that there was another side of my brain that I could use, the analytical side, the factual side. Because in healthcare, as a nurse, you learn how to communicate with your feelings and you learn how to communicate with helping people, right? That's very common. But in the business world, it's all about what are our goals? How are we going to get there? What's the strategy? What are the financials telling me? What kind of moves can I make? I mean, it's very different. I loved it. So I went back, got an education, and I had been working as a corporate director. So I learned different hospitals. Was for the Baylor healthcare system. I loved working with the Baylor healthcare system. They also asked me to start consulting across the country. So I was consulting with rural hospitals to teach them how to do quality management, teach them how to do process, teach them how to improve. What did it mean? How did your patient outcomes improve? So then I started working for the for-profit side as a consultant. So Baylor Healthcare System was not for profit, but they also had a for-profit side. For-profit was a lot more profitable. You had a lot more opportunities.
Sure.
For example, the physicians could own in a hospital and a surgery center. They owned part of it. So when they owned part of it, they really wanted it to be successful. And so I started to consult in that world, and then I took a job working for United Surgical Partners as a senior executive for them. That was a great learning experience as well, and I had several hundred facilities that I was responsible for. And then I started working for Nuterra out of Kansas as a senior executive, where I was actually responsible for the CEOs and the administrators of ambulatory surgical centers and hospitals and all operations in between. So I helped to build, which is a de novo, did many acquisitions, buy-sell events, so really got to use my chops on that.
Wow. So going from respiratory therapist to going and eventually receiving your MBA and utilizing it on the analytical side of healthcare, how does your experience as a nurse, because I assume most C-suite executives in the hospital setting or in any kind of medical field setting are probably not, don't have RNs behind their name. How did that differentiate you, and how have you used it to your advantage to get to where you are today?
Thank you. So, as I'm thinking, it can be a positive or it can be a negative.
All right, break those down.
So, as a CEO, I don't necessarily broadcast that I'm a registered nurse as well, because in some people's minds, they think, oh, you're just a nurse. So they automatically pigeonhole you into, okay, go give the patient a bed bath now.
Right.
And so when I do let people know, which I have at Wilson & Jones, I'm very proud of the fact. I mean, I'm still licensed in the state of Texas and I can still save your life. It really helps when physicians understand that I get to the clinical side. I understand what you go through in the operating room. I have worked in pre-op and post-op. I've run surgical hospitals. I've run ambulatory surgical centers. I've taken care of patients. I get it. The nurses, I understand what you're going through. I get it. Do you have what you need to do your job? Let's think about this. So it helps me on both sides of the fence. I think that it helps me mostly with that clinical knowledge, because remember, I started out in the basement next to the morgue. I really understand processes. I understand how things work together and how they don't work together, especially communication.
In the medical field, since it is so regulation driven, and I mean, when I had my kidney transplant, I remember them saying, all right, what's your name? What are you here for? The checklist.
Which
right?
kidney are we going to take out
Exactly.
today?
Who's your doctor?
Sure?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I just had an added too. I didn't even have to give one up. But it's already fairly process driven, at least, or checklist driven, I should say. Is it pretty? Are people in the medical field pretty amenable to systems and processes? Is it easy for you to implement new ones, or they just like the status quo? Don't be introducing more stuff.
Absolutely. So let me give you an example. Safety is paramount for any facility, whether it's a hospital or a physician's office, and that's why the regulatory bodies came in, because of safety. We adopted a lot of the safety things from the pilots because they have a checklist, and you do it the same way every single time because it helps you to minimize errors.
Checklist manifesto, right?
That's right. And so early on, probably in the, I would say, 90s, there were wrong site surgeries being performed. And
somebody was operating on the left knee instead of the right knee.
Yep, happened all the time. Doing the wrong surgery on the wrong patient, you name it. Devastating consequences, absolutely devastating. And so the regulatory body said, okay, we're going to put this in place, and we're going to have to do a timeout before the surgery. The physician and the team are going to have to say, timeout, is this the correct knee or whatever? And everybody says yes, everybody agrees. If somebody doesn't agree, you stop, you pause, you figure out why, but you do not move on. It took 10 years for all of that to be implemented.
Wow.
Although it was required, many facilities wouldn't do it because the physicians refused to do it.
Because it was silly.
It's silly. I'm not going to do that. I know what I'm doing.
Wow. All right. So Wilson & Jones, you mentioned that when you stepped in, it had some problems.
Yes,
right?
sir.
And walk us through some of the things that you've done to improve performance or solve problems. And then moving forward, what's the vision? What's the vision for Wilson & Jones?
Thank you. So I started, my first day was January 26th in the year of our Lord, 2022.
At least you're post-COVID, right?
Exactly. It was a great fit. I loved the culture, loved the people. And so as a servant leader, I needed to make sure that we were taking care of our patients, number one. So I started out very slowly, getting to know my team. I did what's called a 9-box assessment on the leadership team that tells me if they're a low performer, a mid performer, or a high performer. And if you fell below the high performing bar, Then we sat down and we figured out, do you have what you need to do your job? These are the issues. If you can improve, that's great. If not, then perhaps there's another opportunity for you. And that's a very difficult, but again, if you're going to be successful, you have to surround yourself with people who are excellent. And if I walk into the room and I'm the smartest person, we got problems. So, for example, we didn't have a chief nursing officer. And so I was assessing what we had, what we didn't have. And Amy Kaufman had been there for 25 years. Absolutely phenomenal nurse, master's prepared. And I'm like, why aren't you the chief nursing officer? And she's like, nobody's ever asked me. I'm like, well, I'm asking you. I had also been a chief nursing officer in my experience. And so I was able to sit down with her and mentor her and help her through that transition. She was highly respected by all the staff, all the physicians. It was a great, great move. And then I started to open my bag of the people that used to work with me and for me. I'm like, do I have a job for you?
Yeah.
So I was able to hire a phenomenal revenue cycle director. Christy had worked for me in 4 different hospitals, and she followed me, moved up to Sherman. Several of her staff members, my medical staff manager also had worked for me in 3 other hospitals. She moved up to be with me. And then slowly started to build an absolutely phenomenal team. We've got a really phenomenal quality director. And remember, I did quality for 10 years. And so
you have high expectations.
Very high, and she's met every one of them and then some. So that was the first, thing. Who do we have? What do we need? Are we taking care of our patients? Then you focus on your people. As a servant leader, I'm a people person. And so that being said, then it was, okay, how do we get more revenue in the door? So in 2022, I opened up an occupational health clinic, which serves the city of Sherman. So we do all of the physicals, hearing tests, everything for the firemen, EMS, policemen. So that was in 60 days. I reopened a behavioral health unit. It's a 12-bed unit. We opened that back up to serve. Started a nurse midwife program, the first of its kind in Grayson County. Very exciting. Improved all of the functions on the floor, processes, was able to hire a new general surgeon. She'll be here March 1st. Very exciting. So operationally, I brought in service lines that were revenue producing. Business office was a big concern, so we've turned that around so that we can collect the money that we've earned, things of that nature.
And so you walk in and you start with your overall assessment and you start identifying all of these needs, all of these issues that need to be solved. Quite a few. How do you prioritize and execute?
That's a loaded question. Always start with your mission, vision, and values. So the mission is to care for the people in Grayson County. And that's the main issue. Okay, how do we do that? What kind of service lines do I need? What kind of growth are we going to have? We know that growth is coming to Sherman. How do I get ready? How do I utilize what I already have in order to be successful? And then go to your mission, your vision. All right, well, how do we get there? So I started to reach out to the community. I met with the police chief, Lieutenant Garbacik, the EMS director, the fire chief, and I sat down and I said, I know that things haven't been optimal. I don't know the history, don't want to know, but this is my approach. We're going to build the quality inn at Wilson and Jones, and if I have the quality, the rest will come. So let me get my house in order. Let me show you and let me prove it to you. And so within 6 months, we were able to improve our star rating, which is what Centers for Medicare and Medicaid give you, and we went from 2 stars to 3, so we're the highest quality lowest cost health care in Grayson County for an acute care hospital.
Wow.
Our competitor went down in quality. We went up.
And so you're on the rise. What does the vision for Wilson and Jones look like?
So the vision is we need to be able to meet the needs of our community. We can always use help. And so to that end, we can use all the support we can get. We need some capital. We've got some older equipment. It works just fine. We can take care of our patients. We implemented a new program I did called MD Save. MD Save is a program, if you have a very high deductible or you don't have insurance, we can give you a cash price. So you can get an x-ray for $140, and that's with the radiology read. You can pay for it with 10 different credit cards if you need to, and it's a wonderful service. So I'm putting in all of those wonderful things to be able to continue to serve. We've been around for over 100 years, and I want to keep going.
All right. Well, thank you so much. We always finish with a couple of questions. Give us your favorite books, business or non-business, or both.
I can never remember the name of books. I listen to a lot of books when I'm exercising, the audiobooks. Mm-hmm. I really enjoyed reading the series with Killing Jesus, Killing Lincoln. I can't remember the guy's name.
Oh, Bill O'Reilly?
Bill O'Reilly.
Yeah.
I read all of those series. I like to read a lot of history books.
Okay.
Sometimes they can be mind-numbingly boring, but they're really important. I just never remember who the authors are.
Sure. Hey, that's all right.
Murder mysteries are always good. The whodunit.
Absolutely. I always turn to fiction before bed. That helps my mind kind of calm down. If I start reading business books or how-to books before bed, then I'm sunk. I'm not going to sleep.
Like, how do you do that? Oh my God, that's a great idea. Yeah.
Fantastic. You said that you listen to books. Do you listen to podcasts as well?
I do.
What are some of your favorites?
This one's very, very good.
So I started listening.
No, it's wonderful. I felt so comfortable because it's very easy. And so I listened to a lot of podcasts. My husband and I, for fun, we have a Cessna 182, so we fly. He's the pilot in command. I fly as well, but we love to fly all over and experience different things.
So your time as a flight nurse did not turn you away from small aircraft.
No, I love it. I love to fly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. And best of luck in the future of moving Wilson & Jones forward.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing you again.
All right. We'll talk to you next time.
Thank you.